My name is Brent Haas. I am Associate Dean and Director of Admission Affairs at the Yenching Academy of Peking University. And it's my great pleasure to formally begin today's information session about our program. So I'd like to give you an overview of what we're going to be talking about today. First, I'll do a very, very brief discussion of the history of the fields of sinology and China studies. I'll give you an introduction to Peking University and our program at the Yenching Academy. I'll also give special attention to the application requirements and timeline. Hopefully that'll only take about 30 minutes or so. The majority of today's activity will be a moderated discussion with myself and 3 YCA alumni, all from Latin America. And then we'll have time for a question and answer at the end of today's webinar. Since this is a webinar format, if you have any questions at any point during today's presentation, please feel free to type them into the Q&A function. Either one of my colleagues in the admissions office will directly answer your questions via the chat function, or will indicate that we would like to answer those questions live after our presentations have ended. So with that having been said, please allow me to go ahead and get started with a brief overview of the history of sinology and China studies. So there are multiple terms that are used in academic context to talk about how people approach the academic study or intellectual engagement with China. Sinology, Chinese studies, sometimes Chinese language studies, and China studies. So sinology is the oldest of the ways that non-Chinese have engaged with the academic research about China. It's focused mainly on philological or traditional language-based research of the written classics of Chinese civilization. It is interdisciplinary and very much a kind of a humanistic academic endeavor, focusing on history, culture, religion, and literature. This field required a deep knowledge of different language forms and grammatical structures of Chinese characters over the centuries, as well as the classical written Chinese language. It was institutionalized in European universities in the 19th century. Chinese studies or Chinese language studies began in 19th century Europe as a response to the needs of colonial officials, traders, and missionaries to be able to understand how to speak different variants of regional Chinese dialects and engage with business partners and Chinese officials, etc., through language. Now, China studies, and this is somewhat of a debated term, grew out of the area studies movement after World War II, beginning in the United States, but quickly adopted in the UK, European continents. And I think China studies as a portion of area studies, I think it's safe to say, has become one of the most influential ways of academically researching and teaching about China and other regions around the world. One of the significant innovations of the area studies / China studies models was focusing on contemporary language, not just focusing on traditional classical Chinese written language, and also trying to integrate some of the research methodologies and theories of the social sciences. Despite the certainly problematic historical legacy of Christian missionary activities around the world, missionaries were quite influential in the establishment of sinology as an academic discipline. And here we see 2 individuals who I think are useful bookends for illustrating this complicated and at times problematic historical legacy. However, Matteo Ricci and then James Legge both were incredibly influential in building the foundations of sinology as an academic discipline. Matteo Ricci was a Jesuit missionary in China in the late 16th and early 17th century, who began the Jesuit academic tradition of translation, bibliographic work, of really introducing the building blocks of the written texts of Chinese civilization to a non-Chinese, mainly European elite audience. Several centuries later, James Legge, who was a linguist, missionary, and eventually became a sinologist, he became the first chair of Chinese language and literature at Oxford University in the late 19th century. And James Legge's incredibly detailed academic translations of the Confucian classics remain, in some ways, still the height of philological academic translation and scholarly engagement with the Chinese classics. It is a very unique translation style, but that uniqueness and high academic focus makes his translation still useful to scholars today. Chinese language training and the development of professionalized academic sinology formally began in France in the mid-19th century. And much like the history of colonialism, imperialism around the world, Chinese language study and its academic origins are connected to overseas empire. So there is certainly a problematic aspect of this history. Nevertheless, and if we're looking at the history of these academic disciplines, we certainly have to locate the origin of formalized, institutionalized Chinese language study in Europe in 1843 at INALCO, what is now known as INALCO. And then professional academic sinology in its European incarnation began with, as one scholar, David B. Honey, called a trio of giants of French sinologists, Edouard Chavannes, Paul Pilliot, and Henri Maspero. These were foundational in the development of academic sinology in the late 19th century. Area studies, I think, really locates its origins, not in American academia, and a blend between US national interest in the developing Cold War, but also as a process of trying to move the academic study of China out of the past and more into the contemporary period. I think it is safe to say that one of the most influential academics responsible for the founding of the area studies model of China is John King Fairbank at Harvard University. He certainly revolutionized the academic approach to studying China by integrating contemporary language study, training in a social scientific discipline, and research and a high level of academic publications in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. China, as a nation state, as a civilization, remained the subject of the area studies models focus, but it tended to shift some of the temporal focus from traditional or historical China to contemporary China, which essentially meant China of the 20th century, and even more so, China post 1949. And area studies is still a highly influential, if criticized, model for understanding and engaging in academic research about the so-called non-West. So institutional research on China today, I think, can be summarized as taking place in a few key kinds of formats. Sinology as an academic discipline still formally continues at universities in continental Europe. There are also attempts to reinvigorate or reform some of the more problematic aspects of sinology in other universities around the world as well. Now, study and research on the language and culture of China is generally carried out in what might be called departments or institutions of East Asian languages and cultures, East Asian languages and civilizations, or similar names. You can find similar names and departments and institutions at universities all around the world today. Area studies focusing on China or Asia also continues in perhaps institutes of Chinese studies, as well as many university academic departments. And at both the undergraduate and graduate levels, China is often a sort of regional concentration within departments and other academic disciplines. So for instance, you might be a history major in your bachelor's degree with an Asian regional focus, or a political science major with a Chinese political science focus. And of course, what hasn't been discussed is quite a bit. There are policy and strategy analysis taking place on China in think tanks all around the world. There are also Confucius Institutes and Confucius classrooms that are teaching Chinese at different levels, from secondary education to post-secondary education around the world. But it's important to emphasize what is missing in this very, very brief overview of the development of the academic disciplines of sinology and China studies. So what is missing here? First and foremost, what is missing are historical engagements by Chinese scholars with the texts of their own cultural tradition, and this goes all the way back 1,000 years, if not much more. One notable example would be the commentarial tradition and the Kaozheng movement in the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries in China. Another example are East Asian civilizations and eventual nation states that participated as both an insider in Confucian civilization and later would develop their own rich traditions of sinological academic research. You can certainly think of Japan, Korea, as well as some areas of Vietnam. What else is missing are overseas Chinese communities in Southeast Asia and other places around the world that still, through the 19th and 20th century, were deeply engaged in teaching their own civilization in regionally specific formats based on their overseas communities' needs and individual cultures. And also when, there are other important regional or national sinological and China studies academic traditions that I haven't had time to talk about. You can see these in Russia. You can see these in Portugal and in the Netherlands. You can certainly see the growth of China studies across disciplines through research institutes and in different academic departments all across Latin America as well. So this is a very truncated, incomplete overview of the history of sinology and China studies as academic disciplines. Another thing that's missing is modern Chinese responses to European sinology and to Western area studies models of China studies. And we see vociferous and engaged responses in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s among Chinese academics, as well as in the first 2 decades of the 21st century. So what does it mean to be engaged in sinology or China studies in China? This is in my opinion, a fascinating academic question. And it's one that the Yenching Academy of Peking University is highly engaged in, we hope, defining what it means to conduct China studies research in China. Where do we do this? We do this at China's oldest and most respected institution of higher education, Peking University, founded in 1898 as the Jingshi Daxuetang, the Imperial University of Peking. You can see a bird's eye view of our campus here on the right. We are located in northwestern Beijing, just outside of the northwestern corner of the 4th Ring Road, if you know our campus and Beijing's geography. A few beautiful images of Peking University campus. Jingyuan Courtyard is a historically and culturally significant portion of PKU's campus, where the Yenching Academy has our administration building, our teaching building, our large multimedia lecture hall and event space, all in Jingyuan Courtyard. PKU today has over 11,000 faculty members that are divided into 51 different schools and departments, as well as 10 key national laboratories. These faculty, in addition to the professional administrative staff at the university, serve over 46,000 full-time students and over 4,000 international students in any given year. So what is the Yenching Academy of Peking University? Simply put, we are a 2-year, fully funded master's program in interdisciplinary China studies. We explore contemporary China. We look at the changes that have taken place domestically to Chinese economy, society, culture, politics, what have you, over the last several decades. And we look at how these internal changes have not only reshaped the lives of Chinese people, but also have redefined China's role in the world. Now, I am Associate Dean, but I also run the admissions office, and I've been fortunate to teach 5 or 6 classes in the history field to Yenching scholars over the last several years. And I can personally attest that those who join our program are outstanding. They are interesting young scholars. They are fascinated by better understanding today's China, as well as historical China. And they bring interesting, diverse perspectives and help consistently recreate our student community and are very deeply engaged in this process that I have been describing, defining what it means to conduct China studies research in China. We are interdisciplinary, so that means we bring multidisciplinary teaching methods and research methodologies to the already fully formed system of graduate education in the People's Republic of China. And we, this last bit, a catalyst for international dialogue, may sound like it's, insincere, but when you have brilliant young people from all over the world, different national, cultural, religious, political backgrounds, all interested in studying China, taking classes together, living together, you would be surprised just how much fascinating and sometimes challenging, but always worthwhile international dialogue takes place in our classrooms and the dormitory and on campus. We are a residential program, so that means that all first and second year Yenching scholars are required to live on campus together in the Yenching Academy House, a dormitory specifically for Yenching scholars. Scholars from the Chinese mainland, Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan are required to stay on campus for both years of their experience here at YCA. International scholars have the option of living off campus in the second year. The language of instruction and of education at YCA is English. So no prior proficiency in the Chinese language is required for admission. But since we're a highly competitive funded graduate program in China studies, if you have Chinese language proficiency, previous academic engagement with China, or personal experience traveling or living in China, I recommend that you emphasize that in your application. It's not required, but it can be a competitive advantage. Let's talk funding. The Yenching Scholarship offers full tuition payment. It offers accommodation in year one in the Yenching Academy House and a living expense stipend, or a housing stipend, pardon me, for international scholars who choose to live off campus in their second year. We offer a monthly stipend of 3,000 renminbi. That's roughly 710, 720 US dollars a month. For your information, it's the same amount for the off-campus housing stipend, should you choose to live off campus in Beijing for your second year. We offer round-trip travel for your first year to and from your home base, your home city, to and from Beijing. And we offer basic medical insurance for international students living and studying in China. We have plenty of other additional funding opportunities. The Dean's Research Grant for independent research in year one, opportunity grants for presenting papers at academic conferences or symposia, language enrichment fellowships for continued intensive language study in year two, and in your second year, teaching assistantships, residential advisor positions, etc. Now, we are a two-year program and we're a fully funded program, but we have a academic performance review at the end of your first year after you complete all of your coursework. So assuming, as long as you meet certain academic standards, like fulfilling the minimum required academic course credits, maintaining a certain minimum GPA, et cetera, you will receive funding for the second year. This is an important slide, and I'm going to talk about it for a minute or two. Part of how we have defined what interdisciplinary China studies within the degree granting regulations of China's Ministry of Education are the 6 research areas, what you might call China studies within the disciplines. Each research area is interdisciplinary, and they are important to your experience here in 3 ways: the application stage, choosing a thesis advisor, and upon graduation. You will choose one of these 6 research areas when you apply to the program. And part of our admissions review is looking at your degrees, your coursework, your previous academic or research or internship and professional experience, with an eye to assuring that you are well enough prepared to conduct graduate level research in the field to which you're applying at China's top university. This is also what will appear on your degree when you graduate. Our curriculum, in the upper left, the core courses are courses that all first-year Yenching scholars take together. I won't go too much into this just for concerns over time, but they are different ways of approaching China through different academic disciplines. They involve field research components. They involve general overviews co-taught by Peking University faculty, and bringing in leading academics, artists, business people, politicians, diplomats, etc., to share their experiences and viewpoints on the diversity of career paths and the diversity of research projects within broadly defined the academic study of China. All international Yenching scholars are required to take Chinese language courses unless you have already completed the HSK Level 6, a standardized test for assessing proficiency in the Chinese language. Here's a view of our major elective courses on offer at YCA over the 2022 and 2023 academic year. These are in economics and social sciences. And these are the ones that are offered this academic year in the humanities. I need to emphasize here that whatever research area you choose, you are not restricted to taking courses only in that research area. We are an interdisciplinary program, and we encourage all Yenching scholars to take any research or take any elective courses that are of interest to them, and hopefully will help them better prepare for their master's thesis research in year 2. Another way to prepare for your thesis research is our unique system of academic advisors. We have a faculty advisor in the first year and a thesis advisor in the second year. And these 140 advisors are drawn from 24 different schools and departments all across Peking University. Here's some of the shots of our fall field study core curriculum course, where we do a week-long intensive travel learning experience. Recently, we've been taking students to Chengdu, the capital of Sichuan province in the southwest. In spring field study and in any elective courses, we also encourage our faculty members to integrate site visits and field research components wherever appropriate in their coursework, and we fund it. We offer career development through our Student Affairs Office, utilizing the ever-growing and influential Yenching Academy Alumni Network. You have the good fortune of hearing from 3 such alumni coming up very soon. We also have, for instance, a new program, a professional advisor system from different successful professionals in different fields and walks of life, mainly in Beijing, simply for logistical convenience. After graduation, Yenching scholars are highly successful at taking interesting next steps in their career. About 20% or so go on to further graduate study, generally at the doctoral level, but also at master's degree, law degrees, etc. And you can see some of the private businesses, consulting firms, international organizations, etc., that Yenching scholars go on to at the next professional stage in their career. And I also want you to think about YCA as a potential platform for you to blend your interest with China, your previous academic training, and the creativity of the diverse student bodies who will be your classmates and colleagues to create something new. Through Our Door is one such an example. It's an interdisciplinary, multicultural, art, historical, photographic exhibition taking Jingyuan Courtyard 4 as its main historical site. If you're interested, please scan the QR code here and you can do a virtual reality tour of the exhibition. The Yenching Global Symposium is a student-run international China Studies conference that was also one such result of brainstorming among Yenching scholars that came to the administration with a proposal, and it has now become our flagship extracurricular event. You can see the topics of the first 5. And this year's topic, 2022 YGS, which was online, was looking at the recent return of the nation state and the rise of counter-globalization movements and narratives, all under the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. Over the last 8 cohorts, we have welcomed over 850 scholars from 84 different countries and regions. We are highly diverse and multicultural. It is obvious, however, that we have room to improve in recruiting students from Latin America and Africa. We're aware of this and we're working hard to try to resolve that problem. The first 8 cohorts, we had scholars from 348 universities worldwide. These universities that you see here are the ones that place the highest number of graduates into our program. Most Yenching scholars, highest academic degree is a bachelor's degree, but we every year have roughly 20% of our incoming students who have previous postgraduate degrees, such as another master's, perhaps a law degree or an MBA. The research areas at YCA are not planned. We don't have a quota I personally would like a more even distribution of research areas, but that's not how we evaluate applications. Obviously, politics and international relations, economics and management, and law and society are historically far and away the most popular, with the humanities-focused research areas taking up about 20%, give or take. This simply represents what the most competitive applicants in any given year chose for their research areas. So what are we looking for potential Yenching scholars? Well, we're looking for first, an outstanding academic record. We are a highly competitive program, fully funded, and we demand academic excellence of the scholars when they're here. So that means we look for academic excellence in potential Yenching scholars, but that's not all we look for. We're also interested in leadership experience, extracurricular activities. And we want to know, are you an artist, a musician? Have you started your own business? Are you committed to community service? These are things that help us get to know each applicant a little bit better, and also helps us think about how, if admitted, how you might contribute to our student community outside of the classroom. We appreciate potential applicants. We appreciate potential Yenching scholars who have intercultural communication experience and a commitment to multiculturalism. And we also appreciate scholars who have a demonstrated interest in the academic study of China. You don't have to have a degree in China studies or Chinese language in order to get in, but we do appreciate those scholars, and we have many scholars who join our program who are on their way to an academic career related to China. But we also have scholars who are outstanding in other fields, professional and academic, and at this point in their career development, realize they need to know what's going on in China in relation to their field. And so they hope to use YC as a platform to increase their intellectual engagement with China to better set them up for future career plans. We welcome applicants like that as well. And we need a well-articulated rationale of why you want to come to the Yenching Academy. And this is something that holds true, I think, for any graduate school application. The minimum requirement for admission consideration is completing a bachelor's degree by August 21st of 2023, if you're applying for this admission cycle. And we have essentially three different application paths: mainland Chinese students, PRC citizens, applicants from Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan, and international students. Since this is a focused information session on international students from Latin America, I will jump directly to this information. The application deadline is November 27th, 2022. You will need to fill out an online application at yenchingacademy.netapply.cn. We will need to see a certificate of English proficiency, since we're taught in English. And this is the standard English proficiency test, IELTS, TOEFL, Cambridge. FYI, this test score needs to have been done within the last 2 years. Now, if you are a non-native English speaker, but you've attended a degree granting institution, college, graduate school that is taught in English, then you don't need to submit a certificate of English proficiency. If you have any questions, you can reach out to us and ask about that. We need to see diplomas from all institutions of higher education from which you've graduated, and or official enrollment certificates from universities or graduate programs we are currently studying. We will similarly need to see official academic transcripts from all your bachelor's and or postgraduate degree programs. I want to emphasize here that according to Chinese higher education regulations and Peking University's regulations, you cannot be enrolled in another degree granting program while you're attending Yenching Academy. This is a universal regulation across Chinese graduate programs that do not allow dual enrollment or enrollment in two different degree granting programs at the same time. We'll need to see a personal statement in English, maximum 750 words. And this is your standard graduate school application essay: who you are, why you want to come to our program, where you want to go in your career, how you think we can help you achieve those goals, perhaps how you think you can contribute to the student community at YCA. And we also have a statement of research interest. This is a maximum of 1,500 words excluding citations. So if you notice, the statement of research interest is twice as long. It's twice as long as your personal statement. The statement of research interest is in essence your academic or research-focused introduction to the faculty at YCA. It can be a fully formed research proposal with a literature review, a set of research questions, suggested methodologies for answering it, perhaps tentative conclusions, but it doesn't have to be. It should only be a fully formed research proposal if you are quite certain what you want to explore for your master's thesis research at YCA and PKU. Please do not submit research proposals for previous research projects. Do not submit that. We want to know what you hope to study with us while you're here. This is, however, a piece of formal academic writing. You should write in formal academic language. You should contextualize your questions and ideas and perhaps methodologies in the context of relevant academic literature. You can mention a couple of different potential research topics, but don't mention too many because that will prevent you from going sufficiently in depth to give us a sense of how you conceptualize the research process, how you engage with secondary academic literature, and what it is that you hope to accomplish through your research in your time here at YCA. We also need to see your resume or a CV, and we need to see your we need to see 2 letters of academic recommendation. They must be from associate professors, full professors or higher, and they must be academics. So this is the standard requirement for top graduate programs in mainland China, associate professors or full professors or higher. Unfortunately, that means assistant professors or the equivalent cannot fulfill this requirement. If you have assistant professors or lecturers, or perhaps managers at professional jobs or internship experiences, they can write you letters of support. They just need to be submitted as additional documents. These 2 academic letters of recommendation must meet the university standards. I see a question that's popped up in the Q&A. What content should be included in the statement of research interest? Is there a particular structure we should be adhering to? Thanks for your question. No, there is not a specific particular structure, and there is not a specific guideline for what must be included and what shouldn't be included. This is essentially your self-introduction about your research interest and what you hope to accomplish in your research at the Yenching Academy. It is formal academic document. It does need to engage with academic literature connected to the topic that you hope to explore. And obviously it needs to be related to China and China studies. So I think you need to connect your research area to your statement of research interest. If you're applying to history and archaeology, then you should be engaging with historical literature connected to the topic or topics you hope to explore. If you are applying to law and society, can be engaging with legal studies or sociological academic literature about a topic that you hope to explore. And remember, you are coming to China to research in China. And so we hope that you integrate your plans for taking advantage of the resources that Peking University and potential field research can offer you here in Beijing and in China. I think we can talk more about this, and you can hear some of the alumni's views of their applications and the statement of research interest coming up. Okay, let's get to, we can skip that. Here we go. Here is our contact information and our social media presence. If you have any detailed questions about application requirements, please reach out to us at ycaadmissions@pku.edu.cn. Please go to our website, do your research, get to know how we structure our program, look at the faculty members listed on the website, look at profiles of current Yenching scholars. to give you a sense of not just the regional or cultural diversity of our student body, but even more importantly, the diversity of academic backgrounds, of majors and minors, of professional experience. And please use that, I hope, to give you confidence. We are not a one-size-fits-all program. We are not, students can choose their own elective paths. They can choose their own interdisciplinary master's thesis research topics. Similarly, there is not a single profile of an ideal Yenching Academy applicant. So I hope that by looking at the interesting backgrounds and interesting projects and career plans that current Yenching scholars are engaged in, that you will realize that you can create your own potential path to YCA and while you're at YCA. And again, you can find us at the standard international and Chinese social media sites. Okay, well, I see some questions that have come in here. I'm going to go ahead and stop my sharing. And now I would like to move to the next stage of our presentation today. And this is to welcome Yenching alumni from Latin America. We have 3 different alumni who are going to join us. I'd like to move into the moderated discussion section of our online information session today. So Felipe, Daniel, Antonio, would you mind turning on your cameras and microphones, and let's do a little bit of let's chat a little bit. All right, we have everyone here. Wonderful. It's great to see all of you again. I know Antonio, you're still based in China, aren't you?
Thank you very much, Professor Haas. Yes, it's a pleasure to be here. A pleasure to say hi to you again, even if only online. And a pleasure, of course, to say hi to Daniel, Felipe, and of course to all the potential applicants and fellow Yenching scholars. I was actually based in China until last year. I left China last year, actually August. I left to go back to Mexico City, and then I moved to Dominican Republic. And then after Dominican Republic, I am currently in France, in Paris. I've been here in Europe for 1 month, and I'm gonna be here for 2 more months. So yeah, I've been moving a bit around since I left China, but of course always connected to China and always working also in China time. So yes, always in China.
Oh, so despite the fact that you're no longer in China, you're still working in China time? That's a bit of a challenge.
Exactly, it's a bit of a challenge everywhere. Like, but Europe is better in terms of time difference with China. And Latin America, that's challenging. That's 12 hours. But yes, anyhow, like I'm somehow still based in China.
Well, great. Good to see you again, Antonio. So let's see. Daniel, where are you currently based?
Hi, thanks, Brent, for this introduction. Hi, Antonio. Hi, Felipe, and everyone that is watching us. Thank you very much for this. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm currently based in Australia. I'm pursuing my PhD here at the University of Melbourne, and I'm also an academic tutor here.
Okay, wonderful. What are you studying, Daniel?
My PhD is in urban planning. Yeah.
Urban planning. Okay. And which university are you at?
University of Melbourne.
University of Melbourne. Okay, wonderful. And Felipe, where are you dialing in from now?
I'm actually in Beijing right now.
Oh,
yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, I came back a couple of months ago. Was not the easiest thing, but yeah, very happy to be back.
Well, welcome back and congratulations on completing the long, complicated process of health codes, visas, health codes, flights, post-arrival quarantine and everything. Before we move in officially to the questions I have, I think this is a great, considering Felipe's recent arrival, I think this is a great point at which to say, happy announcement that after 2.5 years of international Yenching scholars being unable to enter China due to the pandemic, that is now over. International Yenching scholars have student visas. They are either with us on campus or in the long process of getting here. We currently have about 40 or 50 Yenching scholars already in country maybe they're doing their centralized quarantine, or maybe they're in their transition period to campus or on campus with us already. And by the end of the fall semester, we expect to have probably 90 to 95% of our international scholars in person with us on campus. So I'd like to emphasize to those of you who are watching this recording or with us in the webinar live that visas are reopened and Yenching scholars from around the world are able to come to campus. You will find out, however, as Felipe knows, that the process of getting here is quite drawn out, and that COVID pandemic policy controls in China are quite different than they perhaps are where you're from. And so COVID still remains a very important influence on daily lives here, even though the rates of infections and the overall numbers of infections in the mainland are very, very different from most places around the world. But I just wanted to take that opportunity to emphasize that Yenching scholars are studying with us in person once again, and we are absolutely thrilled about that. It's good to have everyone back. Okay, so we have a few questions that I'd like to address to our different alumni here, and maybe we'll start off. I'd like to hear a little bit about, why you were interested in studying China, why you wanted to study here in China, and what motivated you to apply to YCA. And perhaps, Antonio, you could start us off.
Can you hear me well?
We can, but it's quiet.
Okay. I will try to speak louder. I would like to answer this question firstly by explaining that by the time that I applied to Yenching Academy, I had already completed or I was in the process to complete my bachelor's degree in China, actually in Peking University. So the main reason why I wanted to study in China for starters was because first of all, I was in love with Chinese language. That was like my first approach to China. But after studying language, I realized that China, for my understanding back then, was completely different, or a civilization in itself, as we all know. And of course, like the importance that China was achieving in all different fields opened my eyes and make me feel that I wanted to study in China, and I wanted to engage with all this growth and development that was going on in China. At the time, of course, it's still ongoing as China is increasingly engaging in other fields as well. So why did I want to apply to Yenching Academy back then? Something was clear for me at the end of my bachelor's in China. I was not done yet learning about China. I hadn't understand a lot of things about China, and I saw in Yenching Academy's China Studies program the best opportunity to continue deepening my knowledge in China. And of course, having talked with Yenching alumni from different cohorts, and of course, from my own country, Mexico, and from other regions as well, I realized that the multidisciplinary program in Yenching Academy was the best way to understand China from a global perspective, and as well as studying Chinese or China interactions with the world. So that was the main highlight for me in Yenching Academy's program. That's why I wanted to continue studying. But that's a second reason why I wanted to apply for Yenching Academy, and I think it's also very fair for all of you who are listening us and who might also be worried about your future career. And that was because studying at Yenching Academy and studying at Peking University, a master's, would open new job opportunities, which actually did. And it was also thanks to my experience in Yenching Academy that I was able to land many offers at the end of my studies, or towards the end of my studies in Yenching Academy. I think that's also a very important question here. The two reasons why I wanted to stay in Yenching Academy actually helped me and became true.
All right, thanks, Antonio. So what about you, Daniel? Would you share some of your motivations for not only studying in China, but choosing YCA?
Yeah, sure. So initially, I think part of my curiosity about China raised when I was in Canada. So upon graduating from my undergrad, I lived for some time in Canada. in the western part. So basically near Vancouver, where the Chinese presence is quite big. So it kind of raised my curiosity about China and everything that was going on there. I saw, signages or signs on streets in Chinese in the middle of Canada. So I was kind of curious about what's going on. So initially it was what raised my interest. And then I returned to Brazil for a while and I enrolled in a postgraduate program. And then I started studying China with a focus on politics and international relations. And I ended up writing a thesis on the domestic sources of Chinese foreign policy at that time. So with that in mind, I was already looking for, better opportunities for me in China to have a better perspective about Chinese politics and everything, but with a boots on the ground experience, not from afar. Yeah, so that's why I decided to look for opportunities in China. And one of the reasons I chose Yenching, and Yenching chose me, but I chose Yenching is because I had a friend who was already studying at Yenching at the time, and she recommended me the program. She said she was really happy there, and I started looking through the website and everything, started talking to other people as well, and then I decided to apply.
All right. I'm curious, Daniel, did you already have plans to go on to a PhD before you applied to YCA? Was this sort of part of your academic development path?
I think it was part of one of the choices. I would say it was one of my two choices I had in mind at that time.
Okay.
So the first one, I was thinking about choosing more diplomacy path, so try to become a diplomat or something related to that. But then I ended up choosing to pursue a PhD.
Okay, great, thanks. So it sounds like, Antonio, you were really interested. You'd had previous experience in China, loved the Chinese language, and wanted to continue your academic engagement with China. Daniel, it sort of sounds like you weren't sure exactly where you were going. You had a couple of different paths, but became interested in China through living in the sort of Pacific coast of Canada. So that's an interesting sort of motivation. What about you, Felipe? So what attracted you to YCA? How did you find yourself taking this path here?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think unlike Antonio and Daniel, I really didn't have any formal interest in academic studies of China. It sort of came organically. I did exchanges during my undergrad in the States and in Europe, so I didn't feel an urge to do my master's there. But while I was living there, I encountered there were many students coming from China, and I really didn't have any background knowledge about them. So that probably was the first approach that sparked my curiosity towards China. And then university, I was doing studies in corporate governance, which is the way that you structure the basically corporate organization of companies. And the Chinese system was incredibly different from how companies are managed in the West, to the point that it really defies the paradigm for the studies of corporations. So that made me more interested in the academic sense. And at the same time, a new wave of Chinese investment in Latin America started to unleash. And that obviously sparked the interest from the academic world and the professional sphere. So I thought, like, well, just linking all these dots, all these leads that are coming here, I thought, well, this is a great opportunity. There's no one seizing this opportunity. I'm gonna try to become, the person who knows more about this. So in the future, I can contribute both in academia and in private practice. And that's actually how it ended up working. So it was a pretty good decision. I really don't regret it.
Okay, interesting. And which cohort were you, Felipe?
In the third cohort.
The third cohort. Okay.
Yeah.
So I believe in the third cohort, you didn't yet have the statement of research interest as a requirement. I think we put that in the 5th cohort, I believe. So everyone who's applying now, you can directly thank me for changing that requirement and adding the statement of research interest. You're welcome, and look forward to reading them. But Felipe, since you had you didn't have a sort of direct China studies experience and that sort of path, how did you handle your application materials, which I guess would have been your personal statement at the time? So I think there might be some students who are considering applying who aren't already engaged in China studies, similar to how you weren't. So how did you approach this? And do you have any advice of how that sort of profile of a student can successfully apply?
Yeah, actually, leading up to what you just said, during my, within my personal statement, I focused very much on the academic part. As I did my homework before, and I knew exactly what sort of aspects of Chinese corporate governance I wanted to study, the things that really caught my attention. The problem is back home, I really didn't have anyone to teach me about that. There was no one who knew about how Chinese companies operated. Not even law firms really knew about it. So I thought, like, well, this is what interests me. I don't have anyone who can teach me about this. So I'm going to be the one who goes there and probably, hopefully in the future, bring this knowledge back. But I really would encourage students to do their homework and have a good idea of what they want to research. Not a general idea, just want to go to China because it's interesting, like you have to know exactly what you're coming here for.
I think that's a very, very good bit of advice. I want to emphasize that in your statement of research interest, what you say you want to study for your master's thesis doesn't commit you to that being your master's thesis. When you get here, we're open to your academic exploration, to meeting other people, what you read, the professors you talk to. It's okay to change your thesis. You don't determine your thesis until the end of the first academic year, when you submit a formal thesis proposal and you identify your thesis advisor. But even though that's not required, what Felipe is telling us is that we want to use, back then it was the personal statement, but now it's a statement of research interest. We want to see how you think about the topics that you're interested in researching. It's a way for us to assess your potential for master's level research at Peking University. And so do your homework. And I think Felipe is a great example of someone who takes his own area of expertise outside of China, and while recognizing he doesn't understand it in China yet, taking what he already knows, doing some secondary research, some secondary literature research, and saying, this is how I want to see how what I've learned in a non-Chinese context is changed or repeated or challenged, or something completely new is happening in the Chinese context. That is a very, very, that can be a very effective application and sort of message that you're telling us. So thanks for that. Hey, Daniel, you seem to be have a sort of slightly different academic background than Felipe did. How did you approach your your application materials and telling us what you hope to accomplish here?
Yeah, so indeed, I think I had a more of academic background than Felipe at that time. And of course, my personal statement, I also emphasized that. And the things that I did during that time that was kind of related to China. So my thesis on the domestic sources of Chinese foreign policy, but also these encounters that I had with Chinese and with China in Canada, and other things that I found out about China's relationship with Brazil at that time as well. So I tried to, as much as I could, to provide examples of being related to China somehow, academically or not, but showing that I was aware of this intense relationship with China, and that China was kind of a part of our lives, even in some aspects that we often don't notice, but it's there, like from the things you buy, or from the the policies that ended up running in your country as a consequence of treaties with China or whatever. But yeah, I think in my personal statement, I tried to convey this message that I somehow was aware of this China presence, and through academic and non-academic examples.
Okay, thanks. I think we do see a lot of applicants who successfully get into the program, but their motivation for applying is it's certainly not uncommon to have applicants' motivation be the increasing role that China is playing in their home country or region. Maybe it's business, maybe it's diplomacy, there are many ways, but that often is an understandable and can be a successful explanation for why you're interested in coming to study in China, why you're interested in a master's degree from Peking University. We often see students who say, China is increasingly important in the infrastructure and economic development of my own country and region, and I hope to be a part of that process. Therefore, I would like to come study X, Y, and Z here at Yenching Academy. So that's also certainly a legitimate way. And I think, as I like to emphasize, we're not a one-size-fits-all program. We're not looking for one type or one profile of student. What is important, I think, in your application documents is giving us an understandable sort of connective narrative about who you are, what your motivation for studying, for understanding China is, why you want to come to YCA, and what you want to do afterwards. And that, I want to combine that by suggesting, it's never good in a grad school application to repeat your resume or CV in your personal statement. You don't want to do that. You want to emphasize different aspects of your training and your motivation and your plans in your personal statement, your CV, and your statement of research interest. Now, obviously, it's the same person, but slightly emphasize different parts, but still show a good connecting thread through all of those. Excellent. Well, thank you, everyone. I think maybe we can move on to experience at YCA, unless Antonio, Felipe, or Daniel, unless you have something else you'd like to add to this sort of general topic here.
I just have something else to add on what you just said, is that I think it's important to show that, like you said, is not replicating the CV in the personal statement, but telling stories about yourself that doesn't fit in a CV. So often the CV is very objective and a list of things you've done or accomplished, but in the personal statement is more about telling a story that and things that happen to your life that doesn't fit in bullet points.
I think that's a great bit of advice.
Sorry, I just want to just building upon a bit on what Daniel just said, and I think it's important because there's a question that says, how does Yenching Academy encourage leadership? And also in the requirements that Professor Haas just showed us, it's also said that a potential candidate would also show social responsibility, leadership in different ways, right? And I want to recall that, for example, in my application, my personal statement, I also I stated all the different social responsibility activities that I had conducted during my time in bachelor's, and why that mattered to me and how that made me a potential candidate, right? And of course, like, it was also thanks to that I was able to talk more about that in the interview, because they asked me actually a lot about my social responsibility activities. And how did that match the opportunities that the Yenching Academy would give me as a student. So I think that if you repeat something that is already on your resume, like for example, you did a volunteer program or something, don't just say, oh, I did this. You have to say, like, why that matters to you, how that is building on your personality, on your career, and what you learn from that, and how is that going to help you to build the community at YCA. I think that's also something important to note here.
Another excellent point. Thanks, Antonio. I mean, I'm not saying don't mention anything on your resume or on your CV in your personal statement, but realize that you are taking up valuable word count when you do so, and make sure that it's meaningful. Make sure that it tells us something more about yourself. So for Antonio, it was about, he emphasized his social responsibility work, his engagement with the community, et cetera. And that's wonderful. Do that if that's an important part of who you are and what you want to present to us. If you were, let's say, if you're an artist or a musician, and we want to know about that, then, if you don't have much social responsibility and engagement, well, then you don't need to emphasize that. Emphasize what is important for us to know about you as an individual. Excellent. Thank you all for that. So let's talk a little bit about your time at YCA. So, Antonio, maybe we'll continue with you. What was your life like here?
Oh, well, my life at YCA, besides the very vibrant academic life that I had with all the very diverse courses that I think we're going to have also space to talk about that. Besides that, I was actually very engaged with the YCA community. On my first year, I was Banjang. I'm not sure what's the term in English. It's something like group leader, class leader, or class, yeah, something like that. So I was pretty much in charge of the daily administration for a class, helping our tutor, like class tutor, in different like administration stuff. Also making sure that our fellow students in that group were feeling comfortable, that they had that they were all this kind of stuff. That took a lot of my time as well, but it was very rewarding. That allowed me to get to know better like my fellow classmates. And on my second year, I was also resident advisor. I don't know if we're gonna talk more about this, but so on the second year, we have the opportunity to apply to different assistantships. One of them is resident advisor. Some others are academic assistant. I think Felipe and Daniel were also doing that. But for me, as resident advisor, I was like the connection between the students and the administration of Yenching Academy, but life-wise, not academic-wise. And life-wise, and that was very interesting and very challenging because I was resident advisor when the COVID-19 outbreak happened. And it was a very important role actually because I needed to help the university coordinate all the different protocols for health, all the different regulations that from one day to another needed to be implemented. And it's a role that actually matters. All these assistantships actually are a key or crucial part of our life in Yenching Academy, and also of the engagement with the community at the YCA. So I would definitely recommend all of, if you get elected, then definitely be an assistant, somehow resident advisor or other.
Yeah, those are very, very important roles, and it's a great way to get to know the younger cohort of Yenching scholars when you're in your second year, working on your master's thesis, and to sort of understand the operations of this kind of program from a different perspective. Not just from the perspective of a student, but for someone in a leadership position and working closely with the administration. Okay, yeah, Daniel, what was your how would you sort of summarize or describe your experience at YCA? What are some highlights?
It was great. I think it was a bit different from Antonio's in the sense that my partner was also in China, so I also split my moments with my partner and the YCA community. So I wasn't I wasn't a Banjang or a professor assistant. But I think I could interact a lot with the people from YCA, and that was great because it's a very diverse cohort. Perhaps, like you said before, I have to improve in terms of African and Latin American nationalities, but it's still, you had this very diverse cohort of people that come from all places in the world, and you learn so much. And even if you're not exchanging things all the time, you're learning through seeing and through experiencing as well. Another thing that I think was quite interesting for me is that I tried to maximize my time there. I knew that I would stay in China for 2 years. So I wanted to do all I could. So every time I had the chance, I would go out, explore the city, travel to other places as well. In holidays or weekends, it's very convenient because you have bullet trains to go in everywhere. And it's quite safe as well. So differently from Brazil, so you can travel and you can explore the city, whenever you want. And that was great for me. I think it was the kind of experience that I was seeking for. Like I said, I wanted this boots on the ground experience. And I think going out in the world and going out of campus was one of my most favorite things to do. But the campus then as well, I think the campus is gorgeous and it's wonderful, and it's amazing to walk on around the lake and do things on campus as well. Cheap food and everything.
Yeah, Peking University's campus is amazing. It's absolutely gorgeous. You feel like you're working, living, and studying. There is definitely a sense of being in a kind of imperial palace complex, which makes sense because part of Peking University used to be part of an imperial summer palace complex. So it is absolutely gorgeous. Yeah, it really is quite nice. So Felipe, Antonio, Daniel, anything else you'd like to add sort of about your life at YCA before we move into hearing a little bit more about your thesis advisor and your thesis research? All right. Okay, so let's talk thesis. So Felipe, we haven't heard from you in a while. Tell us a little bit about your thesis topic and who your advisor was and just how you interacted with PKU professors.
Yeah, so my thesis was in the original topic that I mentioned in my application, corporate governance, but I took a completely different approach to what I intended to study, because as you get into a rabbit hole, you end up digging more and more and more, and then your ideas really your academic interests really shift. So I ended up studying the corporate governance of Chinese tech companies when they list overseas, and that thesis topic was incredibly useful because during my second year I did an internship in a law firm, and that's exactly what I was doing, structuring overseas listing of these companies. So I managed to leverage that. So I use my academic studies for my thesis and use the practical knowledge and apply it in the real world. So that was great. At the same time, I was, as Antonio mentioned, I was a teaching assistant for a bunch of courses, many of them related to innovation in China. And I think out of all the professors, the one that I formed a more deeper relationship with was with Professor Dongmin Chen from the School of Innovation. We went on several field trips together, and the greatest thing, it was, the class was engaging, but you also were able to interact with him outside the classroom and ask him, questions that he probably wouldn't say in an academic setting. A lot of practical knowledge as well. So all of that really helped to make my thesis not that academic focus only, but also have a practical input that was really helpful for me.
Oh, that's excellent. And I wonder, Felipe, sort of which came first? Did you get you already knew you were sort of corporate governance in China, broad topic. And did you identify corporate governance for tech firms listing abroad as a research topic first and then find your internship? Or was it you got this internship opportunity and it, adjusted the way you were approaching your thesis?
Yeah, because I chose that topic because the publicly available information is for companies that list overseas, and I wanted to focus on tech companies because of this experience I had with this professor, and well, Beida is really close to Zhongwensun area, which is like the technology heart of Beijing, well, of China for that matter. So obviously the technology aspect was really interesting to me. And then it was just luck that I landed this internship, and the partner that I was working with was doing exactly this thing. So that was blind luck. But yeah, I didn't really intend it to it came first, my academic interest, and then the practical aspect.
Okay, interesting. That's good. So let's move ahead. We're just for time concerns. I'm curious about if any of you had experiences with Latin American students, either at YCA or Peking University, or perhaps the broader Latin American community in Beijing. So let's see. Who would like to start off with this here? Antonio, how about you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, for sure. So it's important to mention that Peking University encourages students from different regions or different countries to be more engaged in the community on campus, to build up that international community on campus. Peking University is a very cosmopolitan place. Just as Daniel mentioned, you can meet people from all around the world, researching all different topics on China and the world as well. So in Peking University, actually, there is a Latin American Student Association. It's officially recognized by the university, and they are officially engaged in activities that the university organizes. So when I was in bachelor's, I was actually for 1 year chairman of that Latin American Student Association. And this association tries to bring together Latin American students from different academic backgrounds and at different stages of their academic life. But I have to mention that most of the most active students in the association are actually students who are either doing bachelor's or language courses. So back then, the students who were doing masters, especially the students who were in Yenching Academy, were not as engaged. And I think um, um, uh, that's for different reasons, but one of the most important reasons is because this organization actually works mainly with the university administration in different activities or programs who are not necessarily academic. They're more like cultural, or they are more, like this kind of activities that might not necessarily be academic. So I think that's a great opportunity for international students from Yenching Academy to be more engaged and lead academic oriented activities. Actually, back then we were able to contact a few of Yenching Academy students from Latin America, and they supported us with the organization of academic activities. So I think Yenching Academy would play a very important role here in building that academic activity in the university. So I would say that Yenching Academy students also need to step out a bit more in the broad Peking University community for that matter. But the opportunity is there, the support is there as well. Yenching Academy supports also a lot their own students in organizing academic events, etc. So it's just a matter to be able to have that interest, and also like to be able to build that relationship with students from other schools. That's to say, like from Yenching Academy, but also there is the sort of organizations in other different universities. For example, we also work with organization of Latin American students at Tsinghua. They do the same things that we do, and there's also other, let's say, like sort of think tanks with Latin American focus in Beijing or in China, and you're also able to meet all the different teachers and all the different professors, the different researchers, both from China, from Latin America, engaged in this sphere, right? So I think there is like a very vibrant or very active community of Latin American people in academics in Beijing. And of course, if you want to go out from academics, of course, there's like even a bigger community doing all sorts of things. So that's also important to note.
Okay, thanks. Felipe, I think you had a little bit of experience with that as well in the broader Latin American community at PKU and perhaps in the city.
Yeah, I would say more in the city. Beijing, I mean, Beijing is a 20+ million city, so you have a lot of people from all walks of life. Even in Haidian district, you have a lot of it's like a very multicultural place because all the other universities also many of them are also quite international. So I mostly kept relations with my embassy, and then in my workplace, while I was an intern, I tried to build relationships between my law firm and Latin American law firms. So even though that there was not the Latin community that was in Beijing or in China, it was the Latin community that was interested in coming to China, and I could act as a bridge with them. So sort of pooling the resources I already had back home and connecting them with the people who were interested in meeting them here. That I think a lot of people actually do that. They basically connect to threads, and they can create something new. I think like one of the greatest things about China and being Latin American here is that there's so much that you can do. So if you want to be the first one to actually do something, just bring people together and start something. And it's surprising how easy it can be if you really are determined.
And you're also, Felipe, now working in the YCA Alumni Association.
Yeah.
You're the alumni secretary or alumni ambassador for Latin America. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing and that new role?
Yeah. So right now we already had the Beijing alumni meeting for all the cohorts. When it comes to Latin America specific jobs, what we're trying to do is like sort of see how the situation here could evolve in terms of travel. And organize some Latin America-wide event in one city in Latin America and see how many people can show up there. Or otherwise have a virtual event. Because I think there's a lot of talent in Latin American scholars who have attended Yenching. And I think it's important that after graduation, we don't drift apart and actually have an opportunity to come together and build something as a community. I think there's so much shared interest that we could have, and you can pair 2 or 3 scholars that are going in the same path and put them together in a room. It organically could morph into something that they can work together with. So that's what we're trying to do.
Excellent. Well, we appreciate what you're trying to do. Also, we have now instituted a new policy, a new program. It isn't started yet because the visas required for this program aren't yet open, but because based on feedback from students who weren't able to come to China or had their time in China cut short because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we're opening up and have approved what's called the Alumni Enrichment Program. And that is a program that is going to welcome YCA alumni back to campus we'll have 10 spots a year for a minimum of a month up to a semester, where it's a competitive application. Alumni write a proposal of what they hope to accomplish, a research project or something that they want to do while they're on campus. And they come back and they can take a course or two. They live on campus. This is funded by YCA. They have some responsibilities like weekly office hours, advising meetings with current Yenching scholars, and then a presentation or a series of presentations talking about perhaps their post-YCA life, and a formal presentation to the whole community about the results of the project they were working on while they were here with us. That will go into effect as soon as the kind of visa that those returning alumni would need to use will be open. A work visa is not appropriate. A student visa isn't appropriate either, but that's one way we want to stay connected to Yenching scholars and connect the alumni to current students. Okay, out of interest of time, and we don't worry, everyone in the webinar, we will address all of your questions. Any sort of last comments that you might want, that any of you would like to share with those listening currently or watching the videos after the fact? Anything you'd like to, that we haven't covered, that you think is important for potential applicants from Latin America to consider?
Yeah, I have a few things to comment. First, also building up on Felipe's. So I think in connection to Latin America, not only in Beta or the Peking University, but China as a whole, I think there's this huge area that is very, very underexplored. So if you want to go ahead and initiate things, there is a high chance that you're going to be the first one doing this. So organizing groups, organize networks, and in several different areas and aspects. So I think this is very important to understand, because the presence of Latin America in China is still very small, I think. So this can be also an opportunity for those who are currently based in China or working with China. The second thing is about the Chinese language. I think I also saw a question about that, but it's also an incredible opportunity to learn the language. I think I could learn the language quite fast, way faster than I could if I stayed in my country, of course. So we have, in the first year, we had this mandatory courses. And in the second year, I got a scholarship. I don't know if it's still running, but in the second year, yeah, I got a scholarship to continue studying Chinese at Peking University. So it was very relevant to my time there, my experience there at China as well, to get to really understand the language. And it's fascinating. It's very different from my language. So I was always really very, very fascinated by learning the Chinese language.
Thanks, Daniel. That's a really good point, and I appreciate you answering this question in here. A little bit more information. In the first year, our mandatory language courses are 4 hours of class a week, plus 1 hour of language partner or language tutoring. And this is not a language buddy where you teach a half an hour of your native language and they teach a half an hour. This is a paid position for Chinese graduate students in the School of Teaching Chinese as a Foreign Language. So it's an important part of their graduate experience and their professional development. And yes, in the second year, you can continue to study the Chinese language through the Language Enrichment Fellowship. It's a competitive fellowship for intensive Chinese language study, generally in the summer after your first year, the fall after your first year, but sometimes also there are some programs that offer sort of J terms, like winter intensive 1 month program in January of your second year. So yes, that is available as well. So thanks for that. Antonio or Felipe, anything else you'd like to sort of add that we haven't covered before we sort of move in directly to the questions?
Well, no, actually, I think everything like I had in mind like has already been covered. Just to wish luck to all of our applicants and also encourage them to apply. Of course, like don't think that you don't fit. Don't think that you might not be good enough. Like please, just do it. Spend time doing your application. Do your homework, research. You have already been given a lot of different resources, like explore the different websites that Professor Haas has already shared, reach out to alumni, ask for opinions, etc. But at the end of the day, just be yourself. Put in there like your interests, who you are, why YCA matters to you, and of course, like I think it's very important, and I think Professor Haas already said this, but I would like to say it again, since I think it's for me was like the most important part of the application. How does this experience is going to fit in your career development or in your academic development, and I think you don't need to have like a clear goal, but as long as you have like a clear vision, right, of where you want to head and what you want to do with this, I think that's already valid enough. So yeah, be yourself and just do it. Don't think that you're not good enough. Because back then I thought I was not good enough for applying, and I dared to do it, and I was fortunate enough to get in.
Well, Antonio's being humble. He wasn't just fortunate enough to get in, he was also invited to be the international student representative giving a speech at Peking University's graduate school graduation. So, he was a bit of a star here, so that's he's being humble, but yeah, that worked out great. Okay, if Felipe, is there anything you'd like to add that you think we haven't covered but should?
No, actually, I would further on what Daniel and Antonio said. I think as a Latin American, you see a program like this, and it might be a bit intimidating at first. You see all these fancy universities listed as the universities that place more students, but we have a lot of talent in Latin America. We have a lot of good universities, and I think the biggest advantage that we have is what Danielle said. Like, there's so much to be done. I mean, honestly, if you want to focus in academia, there's so many research areas that link Latin America and China that you can be the first one doing it. Like, I think that's such a big advantage. I think Europeans and North Americans don't really have that opportunity of being like, the trailblazer in their respective fields. If you want to work in the private sector, you will be surprised of how many companies and how many opportunities you can find, both Chinese companies in Latin America or Latin American companies in China. If you want to do, diplomacy, just being here would put you way ahead of anyone else in the future. So I think the lack of more people and the necessity of building bridges between both regions is your biggest advantage. I mean, I think if you can leverage that in your application, and then in the future, honestly, going to this program really changes changes your life and opens many options. I think at one point is that you have so many options that you can pursue, then that you have to choose which one you actually want to do. But yeah, I think it's a great opportunity, and I would encourage anyone to not feel discouraged and apply, because we need more people from Latin America.
I agree. We do need more Latin Americans at YCA, and there is a lot that you can do, a lot you can accomplish. One alumni representative who was in a recent information session I did described it something as a choose your own adventure kind of program and experience. And I don't know if any of you remember the choose your own adventure books, where they were very popular when I was a kid, where you would sort of select different decisions and had different results. But it is an apt, if perhaps dated, metaphor. Okay, well, thank you all, guys. I've really appreciated your advice, your experiences. I hope that this is, and I believe it'll be very helpful for any of us in the webinar or watching the video. So Antonio, Daniel, Felipe, thanks so much. Please stay as safe and sane as possible where you are, and we will be in touch soon. To everyone joining us live or on the video, thanks for your interest in the Yenching Academy at Peking University. Thank you all so much. Let's stay in touch. I'm going to formally end today's regional information session with a focus on Latin America. Thanks to Daniel, Antonio, and Felipe. Take care.